Many of our ideas about sexual assault are shaped by entertainment, movies, and television shows that depict violent, physically aggressive struggles in dark alleys involving total strangers. These depictions create a narrow and dangerous baseline. They suggest that if a person didn't scream, fight back, explicitly shout no, that the encounter must have been consensual. The statistics tell a different story. 1 in 3 women in the US will experience some form of sexual assault. But look at who the perpetrator actually. In 90% of these cases, the person was someone the victim already knew and likely trusted. Because these experiences don't look like the media-driven stereotype, many survivors assume their own trauma isn't valid. They carry a heavy weight of shame, wondering why they didn't do more to stop it, simply because the encounter lacked physical violence. Validating these experiences requires us to replace outdated cultural myths with a framework that reflects the actual mechanics of consent. Healthy boundaries rely on a proactive rule. Consent must be explicitly requested. It's an active agreement, not something that exists by default just because someone hasn't objected yet. If the response is hesitant, reluctant, or feels pressured, it doesn't meet the standard of permission. True intimacy is built on mutual, equal enthusiasm from both parties. When we define consent as an active, enthusiastic yes, it becomes clear that the mere absence of a no is insufficient to establish agreement. For an enthusiastic yes to be valid, it must occur in an environment where a person feels safe to say no without facing any negative consequences. Imbalances of power like age gaps, workplace hierarchies, or differences in social standing warp interpersonal communication. A yes in these contexts enters a hazy gray area. When saying no risks job loss, social exclusion, or retaliation, the ability to choose is compromised. Removing the freedom to decline transforms an interaction from mutual agreement into an act of coercion. Beyond social pressure, there is an internal neurological response that occurs when a boundary is crossed. When the brain detects a threat, it performs a rapid assessment. If the aggressor is physically larger or a familiar person, the nervous system often determines that fighting or fleeing might escalate the danger. This triggers a freeze response. A sudden release of chemicals paralyzes the body and vocal cords as an involuntary tactic to protect the victim from harm. This biological reality completely invalidates the cultural expectation that a victim is supposed to scream or physically fight back in this state. Silence isn't an agreement. It's a physiological mechanism of protection. When a boundary is crossed by someone familiar, the psychological impact is profound. It shatters the survivor's trust in other people and frequently their trust in their own judgment. This trauma can lead to chronic symptoms like dissociation, where a person feels detached from their own body, or intense hyper-independence where they feel they can only rely on themselves. Adopting an accurate definition of consent provides a starting point for addressing self-blame, as it shifts the focus away from what the survivors should have done and onto a social and biological reality that they actually faced. Because the freeze response is a physiological event, healing often requires special therapies to help the nervous system process the trauma. Evidence-based treatments like cognitive processing therapy or EMDR work to identify stuck points in a survivor's narrative and retrain the brain to recognize that the threat is finally over. And healing begins when we stop asking why we didn't fight back and accept the truth. Without a safe, enthusiastic yes, the responsibility of violation belongs entirely to the perpetrator.